We'll make it work.
You're dotted for.
Wesley's gone to your head, bro.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a graphic score. Welcome back to Base Camp Beta. I'm Sean.
I'm Chris.
And we are here with our good buddy and esteemed musician and general force in the world of music, John Elliott.
Hello.
Known from Emeralds, Imaginary Softwoods, Spectrum Spools, Mineral Disc, and lots of other things. So as we discussed on the last episode, Chris and I are trying a slightly different approach with the podcast. It's going to be a little more oral history, ethnography leaning. And so we want to kind of really give this opportunity for our guests to tell their stories and help kind of document these music cultures and all that jazz. The other kind of question that we want to highlight here is the broad one of how artists and particularly musicians function under capitalism. Hey.
John, I guess we'll start with the most obvious question, which is how you got into weird music, how you got into electronic music, how you got into the kind of thing that, led us to today.
I think I always had a tendency to lean towards music that made me feel strange. It started with the normal music that your parents listen to when you're a kid, like classic rock and stuff like that. My dad was a record collector, and he used to buy and sell records for extra money at our house when I was a kid. So I would go downstairs, and he had this giant closet filled with these records, and I would pull them out, and I'd listen to all of them one by one just to see what they all sounded like, because I was more curious about a record that had like a strange cover, or like a record that had strange instrumentation or something like that. So in going through all his records, I would find records that were maybe a little bit more different. And as I got older, as in middle school, high school, I started going to punk shows, and the 7-inch records were always a lot cheaper than buying CDs at the time. So you could buy a 7-inch for $2 instead of a CD for $10. So I would leave those shows a lot of the time with more vinyl than records, or more vinyl than CDs and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until I got until about high school, I listened to all the same stuff that you would imagine some kid from a suburb in the 2000s would listen to, from, punk and hardcore and screamo music and stuff like that. But it really wasn't until I found weed and LSD that I started kind of trying to find music that would be maybe a little different than what I was used to. Entry point of which was Pink Floyd, like anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Was this something you had been listening to in your dad's record collection?
Yeah, and I actually didn't really like it that much. But of course,
until weed.
Yeah, weed makes Pink Floyd sound amazing, and so
if there's one revelation in this podcast,
it's true. It's universal, because if you don't smoke
weed, did you ever watch
weed,
The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, I did all that. Took mushrooms to watch The Wall. makes it worse somehow. Yeah, there's you listen to Pink Floyd, but when you smoke weed, you really listen to Pink Floyd. So I started going to local record stores that don't exist in Cleveland anymore, and I would just go through the used records and look for records that had the instruments from Dark Side of the Moon and pretty much any 70s era Pink Floyd. So I was looking at records.
Okay, so you were looking at those in particular. Yes. For those instruments.
So I found Rubicon by Tangerine Dream when I was I think I was 19 or something like that, 18. And I just bought it because it was it's all VCS3. It's all synth. And then I took it home, and of course it blew my mind. Around the same time, the Midwest sort of underground Eastern Seaboard, Michigan noise scene was really kind of in full swing. So me and my friends were going to a lot of shows like that, Steve and Mark from Emeralds. We saw Nautical Almanac, which was like a huge entry point for us at some like art gallery where there was like 6 people. And from there it was basically just all of this is rooted in kind of going out myself and trying to find this stuff. And the internet really wasn't a thing for me. Like I wasn't looking for records on the internet when I was at that age and stuff like that. So it was mostly just kind of through whatever was around me, whether it was a record store or like an art gallery that I could go to see this stuff happen.
And then what brought you to synths? Because then it's like a bit of a jump from searching out records with all these synths on them to then trying to get one. Obviously, probably difficult at the time to get a VCS3, but in general, how'd you get into like synths and finding them and that kind of thing?
Well, I was a guitarist. I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old. I had a guitar teacher who was kind of like a dollar bin John Fahey kind of guitar player. And I took lessons from him until I was about 16 years old. And then he suddenly passed away, which was weird because at the time I didn't really I would go and jam with him, but they weren't really like lessons. I'd been doing it for almost 10 years with him. So it was really strange that he suddenly passed. It was one of the first experiences I ever had with somebody just like suddenly dying. Like I actually went to the guitar lesson and showed up and the guy who owned the music store was like, he's dead. And then I went to his room and it was just empty. So that was really traumatizing. And then my dad, trying to do the right thing, found me a different teacher who was like this jazz lawyer asshole type guy and so I was like put into this like whiplash situation where this guy would have me doing triads in the circle of keys as fast as I could, and then he'd like hit the ceiling with his fucking cane every time I messed it up. And so
music's great, right?
In hindsight, it was really funny because this guy was so lame. He was so lame, and I didn't know what I was doing either. I didn't know what I was just there pretty much. So I kind of snapped. This coinciding with getting towards the end of high school, getting into weed and wanting something more from the art and media I was consuming generally. So I kind of snapped and I actually sold all of my guitar equipment and I was messing around with a lot of noise stuff that I saw people using, like makeshift radios, running them through guitar pedals and shit like that. But I heard this tape by Hive Mind called Tunnel Birth, and I got it off of SoulSeek because I used to go to the Hanson Records website and look at all of the cassette releases, and then I'd go find them on SoulSeek and download them because I couldn't mail order them. A lot of them were sold out at the time or you couldn't get them, and that tape was amazing. So I ordered an MS-10 off of eBay in Japan, thinking that it was an MS-20, which was the synth that I saw a picture of Gray from Hive Mind using. And that was how I got into synthesizers. I actually sold all of my equipment that I had to buy a synthesizer, the wrong synthesizer, which ended up being just the right synthesizer.
I was going to say, there's no such thing as the wrong synthesizer, just the wrong time.
And then from there...
Especially when it's an MS-10.
Right. And then from there, me and Steve from Emeralds, we would... At the time in Cleveland, Craigslist was really, really good. There was this guy who lives over kind of by where I live now named Vic. He would just sign his Craigslist postings with Vic. And his house was like... It looked like a fucking bomb went off. But then there would be like a gigantic... TV. This is like kind of before flat screens were really popular. So we had this like giant, huge TV that would take up his whole living room. The living room would be surrounded like trash. The floorboards would be raw with like holes in it. I remember this one time I was in there and I was trying to buy a Pro 1, a Prophet 600, and a 6-track off of him. Damn. And he wanted 700 for it. And I was asking him if I could do 550. Which is ridiculous to think
for all of that.
Yeah, for all three. And
where was Vic getting these synths? I got a lot of questions.
He was weird about it. He would say like estate sales, and I think what he really was doing was clearing out houses that were. Mm-hmm. This is not too far after the housing crash in Cleveland. Cleveland got rocked like by that stuff. So I'm sure the subsequent years of that. But I was trying to haggle him down, and I was so distracted by this like gigantic television. He had QVC on, and there was just this giant ring like spinning on a platform behind him. And I could tell he was like, he would always itch his palms when the deal would get ready to go down, like when he would agree to like being kind of lowballed.
He lived for this shit.
He was like an addict, and he would be like, there's one time he was like, I like fast cash, man. I really like fast cash. and then so I actually left and didn't take the 6-track, and it ended up being some like stupid number. And then he called me as I was already gone and came back, and he was like 75 more for the 6-track. So I came back and gave him like $75 more, got a 6-track out of it. And granted, these synthesizers were incredibly fucked. Like he had stuck a piece of tinfoil in the back of the Pro 1 to make it turn on. And the Prophet 600 the keyboard was in pieces. So I had a synth tech who is now retired, who was the best, but he was not happy about it. But it was worth it for me to buy them and then have them restored by my tech at the time.
It sounds like you went pretty deep pretty quickly. I mean, like when you got the MS-10, like how did you, especially, there was a lot less information around on how to use these things. And the MS-10 is not exactly it's not the easiest synth to wrap your head around at first. So did you have any like entry point to that? Did you have anyone who knew how these things worked around you, or did you just kind of mess around with it until it sounded good?
Yeah.
In that way?
I mean, this is kind of the miracle of Emeralds in general, is that like we were kind of doing things in a vacuum. In Cleveland, like there were so few artists that were just like kind of just doing like avant-garde electronic music. There was like 2, and they were mostly just noise, like, feedback mixer guys. But the thing that was kind of interesting about how it happened with Emeralds is that me and Mark specifically, we listened to a ton of jazz music. We were very into John Coltrane, still are. So we were very into free jazz compositionally. So we were just taking these instruments that were electronic music instruments and taking the free jazz framework and improvising. So the thing about Emeralds between like 2006 and like 2008 is that we would practice 3 or 4 times a week for hours. It doesn't really sound like that when you listen to our tapes and it's like one note, but like we were really spending a lot of time with our gear together.
What was, do you want to talk a little more about your recording process in this moment too?
Sure. Again, it was more just like so like you were asking like what the examples were. It was essentially like what we saw with our own eyes. The cool thing about that too, especially back then, is like people were very gear agnostic. Like, I remember we saw the Black Dice play. I think it was like the Broken Ear record era, and they were fucking amazing. They were so loud, and like nothing they were doing on stage made any sense. You looked at the gear they had, like somebody's playing a guitar. It doesn't sound like there's a guitar. One of them's hitting a drum pad. So we would see these things and kind of bounce it back out, but it would just be in this very kind of like crude way of not really knowing what they're using or how it's all working. Back then it was like Boss pedals, and people weren't really bringing synths out. It wasn't like a lot of synth bands back then, at least not that we saw coming through. As far as the recording goes, like we had like a really kind of basic DAT machine, and we had tape decks. So like a lot, like the Allegory of Allergies album, I think that was all recorded live from our mixer into a DAT machine. And then almost everything up until Solar Bridge was recorded on a tape deck, just straight from our mixer, which we didn't use any like compressors it was just us playing live into the tape basically. So some of the stuff you find on our records is actually just band practice.
How did Emeralds like form? How did it come about?
Me and Steve were living in a house in our weird suburb hometown very briefly the year after high school. It was around the time where there was a lot more time than money. It's not easy to get a good job. There was a lot of weed smoking and record listening and mushroom taking and acid taking. So Steve and I were listening to weird shit together and getting into kind of stranger music. We had another friend named Eric who we used to play music with, who was also very kind of tapped into that stuff. And Mark lived a city over And he used to play in punk bands, and I used to play in punk bands, so we knew each other, but he started coming around a lot more. And then we just kind of started plugging in gear the wrong way and seeing what we could do with it. And we were basically just like, we have to try to do anything besides what we've been doing. And at the beginning, Mark wasn't even really playing much guitar. And even the beginning of Emeralds, a lot of it was mostly just like electronic stuff and vocals. But then we kind of looped back into it. Mark came back to guitar, and it was mostly just we were going to shows a lot together and living in this house and having a lot of free time, basically.
When you said that that a lot of the records were basically band practice, was there an eye towards basically like playing live a lot? Was a lot of this basically practice for live performances?
Yes, it was way more. I feel like it was more rooted in being able to pull off whatever it was we were trying to do live. I feel like we would also, if we had recordings of our practices, we could listen back. And at that time, you know how it was with tapes and CDRs, people would crank out one a month. It would always be good just to have something in your pocket to be able to put out. So we were always trying to have some stuff going to see what we could, work with. And the gear was changing a lot and our approach was changing a lot. So the recordings changed really fast too.
Vic had an active supply for you.
Yeah, definitely. Vic did. Vic had a VCS3 once, and I just missed it. So my dream of a VCS3,
$200 or something.
He wanted 8,000, and I said I'll give you 5,000, and he was like, "Come over," and I was like, "All right." So like I started like getting it together, and then I called him to be like, "All right, I'm gonna come over," and he's like, "I just sold it." So somebody beat me to it, but
damn. So do you want to talk a little bit about the Cleveland scene, like and kind of the Midwest scene more broadly? Like what you touched on this a bit already, but what were your early gigs like? Where were you playing? Who were you playing with?
And just to situate, I guess, people listening, like the years that we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. From like 2005 is probably when we really started going to see a lot of shows and participating in the local scene. At that time, and still to this day, I don't know how to articulate it, but there's like this Cleveland rocks sort of mentality to Cleveland. I feel like there was like a guided by voices-ification of everybody in Ohio. So we're basically just surrounded by garage rock people and people that just want to make rock music. And like, even if they go into making weird music for a while, they'll eventually just like go back to making like garage rock. And that's just how it works here. It's always been that way. And when Emeralds first started playing shows, we would be playing like at very small DIY venues, which at the time in Cleveland, there was actually so many, which was amazing. I would kill for even one of them now. But we couldn't play with any of like the local bands that could actually bring people out because no one would come. We would sometimes end up on a bill for a rock show, and that didn't ever really go very well. We did open for Sonic Boom once, and it was really funny. He was in a rough state, and he had like all this Casio gear that was like enough to play a set with, but like not enough to sell for dope. Like, and like he did this like bleak cover of Hollow Mirrors by Kraftwerk.
Wow.
That was good. But I mean, for the most part, what happened was we started meeting other people that were starting to make weirder music. And then we started convincing our friends to make weird music. So we would go down to Columbus to see there was this house where Zach Davis used to live with his band Lamb's Bread. And so we would spend time down there, and we met other people down there like Robert Beatty and Trevor Tremaine, Mike Conley from Hair Police. We met Sword Heaven, Aaron Hibbs, those guys. And so we could actually bring them to Cleveland and start doing shows in Cleveland at some of these DIY spaces with people we knew. It wasn't really until we started assembling sort of a unit of people who are making this kind of music together. And by like a unit, I mean like 7 of us. And then putting out tapes with different names all the time. So it seems like there's like 30 of us. And being able to like pool everybody and invite everybody to like come to our shows, that's when things started really changing, I feel like. Nathan Bowers, He's the guy who does Tusco Embassy. He's in this band called Tusco Terror. They had a house in Akron called Diamond Shiners, which is like the first place we would leave to go see like real like weirdo shit at. I'm trying to think of like who we saw there. And Chris Cooper from Fat Worm of Error and like Bill Nace and just weird music. He moved up to Cleveland, and one of the guys in the band, Ben Osborne, also known as Stony Tusco, he bought a warehouse space or rented a warehouse space on the east side, which we turned into a show space. And it was really sick for shows, and it was even better to party in. So we ended up starting to get a lot of people into this loft space when we were doing shows. We did a show with Sightings and like Dillaway, and I think we had like 200 or 300 people in this warehouse space in Cleveland, which is that's like 1,000 people in Cleveland. I remember like there were so many people on the freight elevator that it like broke and they had to like crawl out. Like really good illegal fun that you can't have anymore. And it was around that time that a lot of these bands that that were local that like wouldn't play shows with us and didn't understand what we were doing, they started coming to our parties and they wanted to make weird tapes. And it was cool. It was good.
I guess like moving one step forward from there. So like in the mid-10s, late aughts to mid-10s, all of these different scenes in America at least started really coming together as far as, kind of like noise, techno, sort of scare quoted ambient.
Yep.
All the minimal synth stuff. What was your experience of that era? How did you see Emeralds fitting in or not fitting in? How did you feel about the kind of like tentative embrace by Clubland, so to speak,
sure,
of weird music?
We were honestly so like in our own world with it. And I just feel like because we were so separate from big city music scenes, we'd always stayed in Cleveland. So we weren't like going back to Brooklyn or like we weren't going back to like LA or San Francisco or Berlin or whatever after our tours were done, that it all seemed to happen very quickly. And I don't think we thought too much about what our place was in that type of world, because I feel like at the time we were doing so much within our own community that it felt bigger than just kind of like what we were doing. I feel like things almost overnight became very like internet native. I remember we were asked to tour with Caribou, which we did on their swim tour. And Dan did a remix of one of the Emerald songs on a 12-inch. And like, it had never occurred to me that somebody would like take our music and do something like that until like he gave us this 12-inch. And I liked what he did with it too. But I mean, it was just something that like, we just never really, and especially with like house and techno music and stuff like that, like I really wasn't too hip to that stuff. I was more strictly coming from like an avant-garde sort of Berlin, like school ambient, classic rock, underground rock thing.
Yeah, I was wondering a little bit about your personal relationship to techno in that moment, because techno was really maligned pretty much everywhere throughout the aughts in America.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the kind of like important outposts and one of the kind of real connectors between indie and noise leaning stuff and more kind of like, European electronic and Detroit techno as such was Bent Cran.
Yeah,
I
of
was
course.
Wondering if you had encountered a lot of that stuff through the Bent Cran orbit.
Yeah, almost all of it. And that goes for like everybody in Emeralds. We were going there all the time. And John has such a good way of like introducing music to you that's it's not really concerned with like where it sits in the vernacular at the time. It has nothing to do with the zeitgeist. He's always just like, this is a good record. Or like, this record got reissued. It's 10 years old. You should check it out. This is why this is like this. And he doesn't really have to explain why it's good or why it's important. He'll just be like, this is good. You should buy it. And so that was always really good because he wouldn't really put any kind of like idea about what it is in your head other than to listen to the record and see if you like it or not. And still, even when I go in there, like he'll just have like 4 records. He'll be like, you like these. So for us, like it was really good because he was feeding us like a huge range of things. Like, I remember he gave me a Robert Heinke CD that was an installation work he did. It was like some 1 hour loop of like some water drop sound with some synth pads. But he was Trojan horsing Mono Lake. like what he was doing, like he knew what I liked, and then he knew what to do after that.
I mean, that's the hallmark of a great teacher.
Yeah, he was like just really, he's amazing. That story is incredible. Still.
And did it become a kind of like locus point for a lot of, I mean, because you guys are all putting out tapes and CDRs and that kind of thing. Did that become kind of like a locus point for all this stuff that's floating around?
It was like he would carry whatever we had, but a lot of what we were doing was mail order. It was really strange because we had like a GeoCities website or something. And then like we would send out like an email. And I remember like Will Bankhead, I think he's the Trilogy Tapes guy. He was like ordering Emeralds tapes in like 2006. And like we would get orders from like Thurston Moore and like all these other, it was just so strange that like you're just getting email, like to Hotmail from these guys just based on like word of mouth. We didn't have too much of it. Like we'd have a GeoCities webpage with like our tour dates, and it'd be like new CDR soon or like tape soon. Like I feel like it was such a better way to like, in such a more intriguing way to like try and find stuff or like experience things that you haven't experienced yet. It just seems like it's not like that now. Which
for sure.
It is what it is. But
so then you started a label, Spectrum Spools.
Yes.
How did you meet up with Peter Rayberg? How did the label come about? And what was kind of your goal behind the label? What did you want to do with it?
Well, I was familiar with Mego through John Solera, the Ben Cran guy, who was like feeding me those records. And then my roommate at the time, who was a good friend of John's, who was also a Cleveland legend named Ralph Hausman, who is the guy who founded Speak in Tongues. So me and Steve lived with Ralph, and he had this like psychotic record collection that was just the best record collection to this day that I've ever seen. So Ralph and John had shown us Mego stuff, so I had known about the label and loved it. And then we got booked to play at No Fun Fest in 2008. So we played that set, and then Rayberg was there, and then I got to meet Peter, and I had talked to him and made a dare with him to do an Emeralds record because all of the records he was putting out were laptop records at the time, or at least I made a joke that they were. And I was like, you should put out a synth record. And he did it. And so he liked our set enough to do it. And that was really fun. He had offered, it was Dan Lopatin, OPN, was talking to him about trying to start a label. And I think he was meant to do something with Rayberg, and then it stalled out. And Peter was telling me about it, and I was like, why don't you let me do a label? I was like, I can get you some good stuff. And so he gave me carte blanche to do what I wanted with it, and it worked.
Not to derail, but I want to loop back and just make a kind of like passing nod at the division between synth music and laptop music in that era.
Yes.
Which is one that like feels like super almost illegible at this point. Like why it's just electronic music, right?
Yeah.
But this was really a really kind of foundational divide for
and Mego were
for a long
really
time.
at the forefront of laptop music as a sort of genre, if you will.
If you want to really go there, you could say that Editions Mego normalized having a laptop on stage. They were the first people using a fucking computer to make music, and now everybody on earth does it, which is pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, at the time, there was... It's so funny how it works. Just typical leftist infighting. Like everybody was just kind of like not on the same page with each other. I feel like when we were first coming up regionally, we were playing a lot with Michigan artists, Chicago artists, and like these are people that were making like noise, like capital N noise music. And so Emeralds, I feel like, were too musical for them. We would play one note, which is one note too many. And then you go to New York, and it's more like there has to be some like pop element, or like how do we turn this into like more of like a palatable thing? And it's like, well, we're not going to do that. So it felt like at the time that, yeah, there was a lot of things that were happening that were overlapping a lot more than people were actually giving it credit for, which, yeah, I guess looking back on it now, it definitely feels that way. I don't know what that was, but I have a friend who, he's a Jewish fella who said that he was always really uncomfortable going to noise shows because he never knew if there was going to be some sort of horrible, like, anti-Semitic, like, noise tape that he was going to see on the merch table, or like some
that is real.
Yeah, or you go and you see some stupid project that's like, just
Project Buchenwald.
Yeah, right, or like Shredded Hooker, or like whatever the fuck. And he said that when he started coming to more of the synthesizer centric stuff, the stuff that was coming from Chicago and Cleveland, Brett Nocky had done Catholic tapes, and there was like Alex Barnett and Josh Burke, like that little region. He said when he would go to those shows, he said it felt a lot more like cosmic music, and it didn't seem like. He said it was subversive but not violent, and I never thought that somebody in that time was feeling that way. I was so in it that I never really considered something like that, which I feel bad about now. But now looking back on it, I could be like, yeah, that I'm glad that somebody was able to find that and feel that way about it. Yeah, there was a strange time with a lot of things kind of exploding, a lot of things imploding at the same time. For me, it's like 2000, starting with like the Rhode Island sort of Fort Thunder, early Wolf Eyes sort of Nate Young stuff. I actually am not very hip to what was going on the West Coast, but like from that time, from like 2000 to 2010 is like this window. And after 2010, everything becomes like very internet native. So that window to me is like the window I kind of use, where there's like overlap from the 90s, then this whole thing, and then like overlap into like being internet native.
And then, so Spectrum Spools started 2011? What year?
Around that time, 2011. My friend Chris, who does B-Mask, was putting out really good stuff, and he couldn't find a label that he liked. I was just getting so many good tapes from people, and then I would forward them to Rayberg, and I'd be like, this should be on vinyl.
Because some of those early B-Mask records were basically, they had been small press cassettes and things like that.
Like the No UFOs album was a tape. The Forma album was a tape. Like a lot of them were just tapes. Hence Spools, Spectrum Spools.
Did you have a kind of like, because I mean the label has a pretty wide range of artists, but there is a kind of core team that seems to document this kind of scene that you're talking about. Was that a kind of idea with the label to like take this music that was around you by people you knew from, from these kind of scenes, whether it was B-Mask or Container or Red Nauki or, all these people, and kind of document that kind of scene that you found yourself in? Or was it not so, I don't know, did you have like a sort of driving idea behind what you wanted the label to do?
Well, my main thing was like I just wanted to amplify these artists that I thought were good, because a lot of what I saw around me was good, but maybe not great. And a lot of, there was stuff that I was like, this is like the best stuff happening right now. Like I remember waking up hungover to my friend playing the first Container tape. It was Noah Anthony somewhere in Nashville had played me that tape. And I just remember being like, what is he? I was like, what is this? And he was, because it was like ridiculous. It was like it was just ridiculous sounding. So I always just wanted to kind of amplify these people that I thought needed to be amplified. And I more often than not would feel validated when the record would come out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the label stands as like a really foundational label for a lot of reasons. You kind of broke or helped break a lot of really important artists.
Thanks.
Throughout the tens.
Well, and it was also a really important nexus point in that kind of thing we were talking about. I mean, it was really, you had all these kind of like American noise, avant-garde artists kind of commingling with European techno artists like Donato Dazzi and people like that. And you had this like kind of this real, I feel like the label was a real meeting point for those scenes that became, for a time, really enmeshed, where you'd go to, clubs, festivals, all that kind of thing. And, you'd have in one room, Detroit stuff, like a party like No Way Back, where you'd have, the No Way Back room and then the Outer Space room, it really became this kind of, and I feel like Spectrum Spools really documented that merging of those two, kind of like bringing the ambient room back, but making it better than I never went to an ambient room in the 90s in those clubs. I assumed it was kind of, but like having an ambient room that was a little more about listening rather than just kind of zoning out.
Yeah, trying to make the drugs go away. It's true. It's well, the other thing about Spectrum Spools and like all of my dealings basically in my life that I've tried to deal with is like I try not to be very opportunistic, if that makes sense. I feel like if there's a reason to do something, I will do it. Like one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this label with Peter is because I felt like there was a good reason to. I was like, there's a giant hole where these artists they should have a record out. Why isn't there a B-Mask record? Why isn't there a Container record or like the Temporal Marauder record? I was just like, Joe. Anyway, so I got booked to play the Labyrinth Festival and I met Donato at Labyrinth, and he had known who I was. And again, because I wasn't really checking out so much techno music, I wasn't too familiar with him at the time. But he had told me, he was like, he saw Emeralds in Rome when we played there in like 2009. There was just like a kinship with him that I felt immediately. His taste in like he loves Italian prog, and I love Italian prog. He has a good sense of humor. He's not just like he's not like a techno artist. He's so much more than that. And he was totally into the B-Mask record, just completely head over heels for it. And so he made some remixes of it, and he wanted to do it for Spectrum Spools. Like there was an intention behind it. And because I had known him and I met him and I got a vibe from him, I was like, sure, I'll do it. But I didn't think it was going to be this like, it was kind of like a paradigm shift for the label where like overnight I was getting like so many emails from these kind of like German techno dudes that were like, I made this crazy record with a Volca in 2 hours. It's experimental. Like I made an ambient record. It's, it's just like, I got a mini brute. I went nuts with the delay pedal for 2 hours.
The only thing worse than noise guys discovering techno was techno guys discovering noise.
It was truly. And then some of the artists that I had put out releases for, I don't know how I just felt like the context of the label was kind of distorted by doing stuff for Donato because I think he was at a point in his career where he was really just kind of like just booming. And I didn't really have a good handle on that. I didn't really know that's what was happening with him.
Right.
So I feel like things changed a little bit after that. And then it wasn't too long after that record sales in general and stuff just started getting a little bit.
Right. I guess like, there are two kind of related questions moving forward. One is kind of like in the late 10s, the kind of industry as we knew it really started collapsing due to, the advent of streaming platforms, the kind of like festivalification of everything.
Oh yeah.
Et cetera. So the question is like, how did you navigate this moment? But also like around this time, Softwoods kind of steps more forward as well for you as a project.
Well, for me, like, it was kind of perfect because Emeralds we were pretty much cooked. We were so exhausted from touring so much and just from just being so active that it was like a perfect time for us to kind of stop doing what we were doing because I feel like going forward, it would have just been not the same. It would not have been as good. So in a lot of ways at the time, it was like maybe a little bit harder to reconcile, but in hindsight, I'm glad it kind of stopped when it did because everything after that, I don't even feel like that project makes sense in the context of everything that came after it. So the way that stuff was, I feel like we got the best of it and sort of got to get out while the getting was good because at least back then there was still like European arts funding. And We had a booking agent who ended up being a con artist.
Oh, I've never heard that story before.
Yeah. No, like a true con artist, like hundreds of thousands of dollars from a few artists that he represented over a very long time. So that was kind of like a big what if, is like, were we just getting fucking, and we were getting paid pretty good. So like, I don't know what he was doing, but I everything got so stupid so fast, and everything got sort of, I don't know how it all shook out the way it did, but something about festivals in general just becoming the main mode of watching whatever aggregate of the talent of the last 365 days is just so strange to me. I don't really like playing festivals, but I certainly don't like going to them. Like I would never pay to go to one. Like it's crazy when people are like, we're going to this thing. I'm just like, wow, that's insane.
No, people do.
I know they love it.
Definitely, they love it. Yeah, and it's weird. I mean, because a lot of that festival vacation also became a kind of like, we were talking about this kind of like merging of a lot of things coming together. By the end of the decade, it really seems like a kind of monoculture has emerged. It's kind of, you see the same festivals basically repeated everywhere, same lineups, same kind of experience,
same
just
booking agent.
repeated, same booking agents. Yeah. I mean, you see a lot of that kind of, I don't know, this weird monoculture that no one's into anymore.
I feel like it has been distilled down to like 5 or 6 different global events. You have, some of them, like, I like Unsound. My friend played Unsound last year, said it was good. That atmosphere generally pretty fun, or at least it used to be when I went. But it just seems like it's an industrial complex more than it is a community. And there's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot more money in it that doesn't trickle all the way down. But again, with Emeralds, like we went from playing shows to nobody in Cleveland to getting on Mego, and then being able to kind of juice the European arts money, and then sort of getting out before it got really, really bad. So that's cool.
Getting out like right on the verge of it being basically impossible to put a record out. Because you do some records, I mean, Sean was mentioning Imaginary Softwoods. You do, you have been putting out records since the label kind of stopped.
Yeah.
But it seems like, I don't know, what's your relationship to records now? I mean, you have from your dad, like this really long history with records. It sounds like going back, but now that it's increasingly impossible to put them out. Where's your relationship with like the physical object at now?
So it's kind of enmeshed in my whole like thing, is that like I told my dad when I was like 8 years old, I was like, I'm going to be an artist. Like specifically, I'm going to be a musician. That's what I'm going to do. And from my earliest age, I would make things in editions. Like I would sometimes make a drawing with like crayons, but I would make the same drawing 10 times and then like cut them all out a certain way. So I was always like very industrious and like editions oriented. When Peter died, I decided that the label couldn't go on. He was so enmeshed in what made it so good and he was like such a big part of why, he is the reason why it even worked, but he was just such a big part of what I enjoyed about doing it, that it just didn't make sense to continue without him. On top of that, a couple of years leading up to him passing away, things were not like they used to be. I remember he would say, we got to be careful with this one, or, we can't be pressing 500 or 1,000 of these. We got to start be thinking about like 300. Maybe we should just do a CD. And this really fucked with me because Peter knew he was gonna. He used to sell copies of Blue Monday on the playground. That's like his first experience. He would go buy them for however much and then sell them for double on the playground. So this guy, he's
an early Discogs flipper.
All this guy was ever meant to do was sell records. Like he couldn't do anything else except show people new music. And so when things started getting weird and people like weren't buying records and like people were torrenting a lot and like it's so hard to sell a record now. I really felt bad for him because I could just tell like he was so bummed about it because he just wanted to sell records.
This sounds like the makings of the new Safdie Brothers movie, right?
Right, no shit. But for me, I've always done my personal artistic practices. It moves a lot slower when I'm not in collaboration. I mean, it moves very slow even in collaboration now because I'm not a good collaborator anymore. Or maybe I never was. But for me, it's I'm always working on a record or records. I'm always working on stuff. I'm always working on fine art, whether it be collages or Super 8 films, or I do photography. I got into photography in the last few years. I'm in a heavy collage zone right now. But this is like always been sort of like a domestic practice for me, something I do very privately, or I've started to do more and more privately, because it doesn't make sense to me to be constantly pushing for things to always be coming out, always be going through this like cycle that gets faster and faster and faster. The loop gets shorter and shorter. It doesn't seem like it's good for my practice, and it doesn't really produce very enduring work. So I'm taking my time with making records a lot more than I used to, probably a little too much. I feel like I should be able to make a record every 2 years, and not every 5. The one I've been working on now I'm going on my 6th year. But I'm always working. Every day I play music. I'm constantly thinking about what my record's going to be, or how I want it to be, or how I want it to look. But I try not to make everything I do public facing.
Do you keep a lot of music, like private? And how do you kind of, because I love the world of like private music. I mean, we all as musicians have music that like for us, for some reason, maybe it's like it gets imbued with some kind of sacred aspect or something. Like we don't want to share it,
Yeah.
And like, how do you, I don't know that I have a question there. I just think it's interesting.
I like it too. And like some of my favorite stuff is like I think Joseph Cornell is probably my favorite artist. And he was a shut-in. A lot of my favorite music is made by weird shut-ins. Like those Eno Valthuis records were like kind of a revelation for me. I really like the lifestyle of working the way that I like to work. Like I wake up in the morning, I do my meditation, I'll work on a collage a little bit, do what I have to do in the afternoon, whether it's work, get off work, come home, eat dinner, go upstairs, work on music all night, finish my collages, maybe edit some movies, or do some like typewriter art or something like that. But for me, it's like I would be doing this stuff anyway. Had however things shook out, I would still be doing this. Like I just know that. But I feel like in the last 10 years or so, there's a lot of pressure to present in a streamlined way that doesn't really benefit artists, or it doesn't benefit them in the way they think it's benefiting them. So I've been trying to like opt out of those things, and I would really like to be more active like locally, because I feel like that's always what mattered. Like my favorite Emerald shows were probably like the first ones we played when we were here, or like some of the shows we booked. Those some of the best times, or like regional stuff. But I feel like just kind of putting stuff out, shooting it out into a black hole and hoping that it like sticks onto something. It just seems like a strange way to present, personally.
Well, it seems like if that was always kind of the way music operated in a sense, it seems like that's just gotten so much worse now that, you literally have like, we don't want to make this a podcast about talking about the fucking algorithm, but
right.
That is basically how everything lives online. There is no real offline spaces.
Right.
I think in certain places, people are trying to do that to a certain extent, but for the most part, music took to being commodified on an online platform very easily because there's small files you can send around, and you can.
This is pointing to something interesting to me, where like, in a in a previous era, back to the discussion of vinyl, a release didn't feel like a real release until it was on vinyl.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Yeah, like for people our age
Yeah.
and who are musicians or just fans of music, like, yeah, like cassettes are good and like whatever, files are a thing and,
Yep.
All that. But like the record is when it's real. And that's partially a just format issue, right? Like they're larger.
Yeah.
There's more space for the artwork. It's the physical act of putting them on. But there's something
They
beyond
cost
that too.
more than the other ones.
Well,
Yeah.
they didn't used to, but
Right. It just feels like there's some like there's a certain amount of people outside of yourself that had to work to get it to that point that makes it feel very real. Especially like when especially when like we were doing the first Emeralds record on Hanson, it just felt like it was this whole thing, and it was great. It was amazing. I still personally I like my music to be on vinyl or cassette more than I love CDs too, but I like to hold my record and look at my record.
But there's a funny inversion now where like music isn't real unless it's online.
I
If
know.
music only exists offline, then it's not real.
I have thought about pitching to whatever label I try to shop a record to if we can not do digital. See what they would say to that. Can we just do no digital, like just the record, put out the record? And I think it'd be funny.
No online shops, no online distros,
Right.
no. It doesn't have a entry on Discogs.
God.
No.
You know what would happen. This would be on YouTube within an hour.
But that's okay too, because if you have some like even back when like torrenting was like really big, like right in like the 2008s and 9, 10, like when people were really crazy about it, people would still find a way to like leak shit wrong. Like when the Emeralds Mego record came out, Does It Look Like I'm Here? They leaked that record wrong somehow. Like it leaked, and like the last 2 tracks I think were broken up into like 4 tracks, and one of them was like cut in half somehow. Like I don't know how. Yeah, so even so, if you did do a record with no download, you could trust that somebody would rip it all fucked up.
The SoulSeek version is going to be fucked up.
Yeah, of course.
All the metadata is going to be wrong.
Right.
It's going to be.
Well, what you have to do is pre-leak it yourself with the wrong files.
Totally. But I guess at the same time, you just have to like understand that's the way things are now and just not care about it and just kind of go after the things you like about it, and the things you don't like about it are there, but it is what it is.
We've already touched on this question, but looping back to like the big kind of looming point of query for the podcast, like what are your thoughts on the idea of a music career, or more broadly a career in the arts, and how do you as an artist navigate life under capitalism? Again, we've already kind of been going there, but do you have any anything that you want to add on that topic?
Well, I think there's like a number of questions you have to ask yourself if you're an artist about what your aim is. And for me, I make stuff because I feel there is something industrious in me that has to make stuff. It's not so much because I feel like I want to go present a song I wrote to people. It used to be that way, but it's not like that anymore. And I think where I'm at now is actually the like evolved thing that I've always felt that I didn't really know about myself. There are other people that want to make music because they want to project it outward. They want to change people or affect people with their music, or they want to, engage with a community, or they want to become famous. And if that's what you want to do, that's okay too. But I feel like you have to know what you want to do with it so you can have a realistic expectation about what to expect. I make a marginal form of electronic music that I feel like is kind of over the hump of its popularity. And I'm going into my 40s with the same feeling I have always had about making art, which is like something I would just like to do it full time if I can. So I've arranged my life in such a way that I have a small business which I own and operate myself. It's a house painting company. So I work basically enough in a year to be able to cover my bills. And because there's not a lot of painting in Cleveland, Ohio between Thanksgiving and spring, I spend a lot of the winter chilling out and working on music or just playing my synthesizers or making collages and stuff like that. But I don't know if there's a way for anybody to really make a living out of this without feeling an amount of pressure that is hard to live with. Because even if you're selling a lot of records, you can maybe do that once or twice. I don't know how many people get to do it. I don't know how many people. I mean, it's obvious. There's not a lot of people that can do it full time. The touring industry has been vaporized. You cannot tour in America and make money off of it. Not consistently. People aren't really buying physical media, so that means that leaves streaming, and streaming is not optimal for income. It's just not good. So I think what you should do is you should just try and find ways around it. So basically, that's what I do. I paint and have a job so I don't feel like I have to constantly make music to shop to labels, to constantly be putting stuff out all the time so I can survive. I would rather have a job and work in a dignified way towards the things I want than to have them shaped by forces that keep my lights on. So that's basically how I've, tried to arrange it for myself. I don't know how that works for other people. I mean, most people have a job and work on it in their free time, but I feel like having your own business and doing it that way gives you a little bit more flexibility. If I do get like a show offer or something like that, I can just be gone and go do it. Or if I need a day off because I'm got something I got to do, I can do it. But it's tragic that people just can't be artists, because I feel like we'd have so many good artists if we were allowed. But it just doesn't seem like it's allowed.
I guess to close, where do you see music going? What do you see happening in terms of the music industry and in terms of the future of kind of like aesthetic possibilities?
I mean, I don't know, but I don't think anybody knows. But the way I'm doing it is also kind of different than I feel like a lot of my peers are doing it. Whereas like I'm generally just listening to my friends' recommendations about art and music now, going to the record store and asking the record clerk, like, what's good, going to local shows. I'm not engaging with this stuff on social media at all anymore. I've gotten rid of my social media accounts. I use Discord to communicate with some folks like you. But I mean, as far as like the big kind of narcware type platforms, even though Discord is pretty much narcware at this point, like Twitter, or especially Instagram, which is literally just Videodrome. Instagram is video. It is Videodrome. It's the same thing, which is where like 80% of people's social interactions come from, it seems like. And it's also like, I'm also really baffled how people complain about ads. But if you're on Instagram, everything's an ad. Every one of your friends is trying to sell you something. You're getting ads between that. Like, it's just like the Home Shopping Network and Videodrome at the same time. I feel like the way I want to watch whatever happens unfold is like through my own eyes, and not through these algorithms, and not through these like cultural like wave shaping technologies that again are like algorithmically driven. I don't want to see things through that. I don't know if we'll get another app. Maybe we'll get another app.
I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah, make it 11. Make it 11 apps instead of the 10 that all of humanity uses. Maybe we'll get a new app that changes everything.
This one's going to be good.
Yeah, this one's going to be great. I have a lot of friends who are a little bit older than me, and it's not, they don't really say it in like a sad way, but they're like, this is kind of like the end of the road. What we have now, because of, I think this is very much based on algorithms, is that algorithms point at the same thing over and over. So they point at each other until you get this very kind of smoothed out, palatable version of the thing that it came from. I blame the Muzak-ification of like the ambient wave, the ambient wars of the last 10 years, where this shit just sounds like dentist office music at this point. Like, it doesn't matter if you're using some crazy modular, it just sounds like some fucking like nitrous out, like dentist office, all major key. The world is so fucked up right now, and it's so crazy that like in electronic music, there's like not much protest music being platformed very broadly. Like where is the fucking protest music? It's certainly not coming from, I'm not going to name names, but like, you know who you are.
Well, the ambient wave you're talking about has been, I feel, pushed as a kind of like palliative care. You know, it's basically like it's self-consciously marketed as like, hey, the world is tough, turn inwards, do some self-love, do some self-help, put on this, and like reconnect with, you know, whatever, as a way to turn away and not face the issues.
Whoa, Chris, are you saying that there's fascism in ambient music?
And consumerism. It's like
I was referencing, John. I don't know if you remember. Like I guess close to a decade ago, there was the fascism and ambient music article that went briefly.
It was an article. It was an article,
and it was dissing the kind of like Dom Furno, etc.
I remember that.
Yeah.
They'll never.
And the article went briefly viral and then was like universally like criticized and then wiped from the web. So,
but of course, like it was one of those things where like, well, there is fascism in ambient music and it's coming from a lot of directions, and like it could come from like that was kind of very taking the obvious kind of signifiers of kind of like you were talking earlier about noise music scenes that were kind of using, confrontational symbolism and stuff. But there is the also sort of the kind of, hey, like it's cool, just like, just put this on and zone out and don't think about what's going on.
Right.
Kind of ambient music, which is dressed up to be very approachable and very
sure.
kind of non-confrontational, but it's just as fascist in many ways, at least in the way in which it's trying to kind of like breed acceptance.
Well, yeah, the aim is adaptation, not confrontation. It's about,
exactly.
We may have just lost John though.
That's the second you start talking fascism and ambient music,
he's out. There he is.
Hey, sorry, I lost you there.
Yeah, Meta did not like what we were talking about.
Yeah, it seems like no, but like to your point, like when I think about coming into that scene in my 20s, there was a record by Kites, Chris Forgus, called Peace Trials. Came out on Load Records, and that to me is like the ultimate like Bush administration like protest record. Like this record sounds like how fucked up everything was, or like Burned Mind by Wolf Eyes, like, but. I mean, I guess to wrap it, I have some older friends that say like, as long as these algorithms and things keep continuing, like everything is pointing at each other in a way that makes everything kind of untenable. It's like people can't imagine a future anymore, or imagine something that's different than what they're constantly being suggested. And it really feels that way, which is scary. So until that changes, I just don't see how it works. There's such a risk aversion to like everything. Like that's why every record that comes out is a fucking reissue now. Like, just reissues. There's it's like
no. I mean, you can make the only real records are the ones that came out 40 years ago that no one liked and are now being reissued. Whereas like a new piece of music is probably viewed with suspicion or worthless, or it has to maybe drape itself in the costume of something, present itself as if it were a lost classic from the 70s.
Right, and a lot of those lost classics suck. They're not good.
I was going to say it's way easier to sell a like super middling Japanese ambient record from 1985 than it is a really good new ambient record.
Right, of course, I know. But yeah, it's
but that shouldn't be an of course. There's there's no logic to that. Right?
There's no logic to it.
The Japanese record's authentic. It's an authentic, there is this kind of like, I think, for a lot of the record buying public, it is, it's increasingly you buy records that maybe to broadcast an image of yourself.
Yes, I think it's a lifestyle. It's like a lifestyle device, or
It definitely was always the case. I mean, Sean, you and I were talking about this, when, how it did feel like in older generations, maybe like from our generation older, music was a really integral part of people's self-conception, and it was a huge part of your lifestyle. Is how you navigated the world, how you made friends. It was how you kind of saw yourself in the world, and that seems to be disappearing. But it does seem to be in. I don't want to sound like a bunch of old guys complaining about the youngins, and it's definitely not about. I don't know that it's really necessarily about generational changes, but there is now, for whatever is going on. Buying records does seem to be, like a kind of lifestyle thing that you broadcast or something. Mm-hmm. So buying like a reissue of some middling 80s Japanese ambient record is like the authenticity of it is kind of what you're buying into. It has the music is kind of is really kind of beside the point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, there was a kid around here who I knew for a long time who knew I was an artist, but just thought I was like an older weird guy, which is true. But, we hung out for years, and I would see him for years. And then one day he was like, "You're on Lava Lamp." And I was like, "I don't know what that means." And he was like, "It's a Spotify playlist." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I love Lava Lamp." And I was like, "I've been trying to like get you to check my shit out for years. Like I've like told you about like I've given you my records and you never listen to them. But like he heard, he heard me on Lava Lamp and he was like, 'You're on Lava Lamp.' And I was just like, I don't know what that means."
You made it.
Yeah. Or I didn't. Because I've looked at that playlist.